For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh. Today we are jumping into the path of danger with Twisters. I guess I should have done Twisters. Much like its 1996 cult classic counterpart, this film tells the story of storm chasers attempting to make a difference in the world by either understanding or trying to actually eradicate the world from tornadoes. So I had never actually seen the original film up until last week, so the review that you're getting ready to hear is completely neutral. There's no nostalgia or bias attached to this one, but this film is a lot of fun. This film has an immense amount of charm to it, and I think 90% of that comes from Glen Powell's character. Make no mistake, conceptually speaking, this is the story of Daisy Edgar-Jones's character throughout the duration of the film, but I would argue the minute that Powell's character shows up, the story kind of completely flips and you're more interested in his character than you are hers. That's not to say that Jones isn't great in this story or that you don't actually attach yourself to her character by the end. I would argue actually her character has the best development and through line throughout the entire film, but it's really Powell that really steals the show. This film hits a lot of the same story beats as the original one does. It has a lot of those same story patterns that it follows with the storms. There is a sequence that's very equivalent to the drive-through in the original film. There's a mysterious, platonic will they, won't they storyline throughout the course of this film. And so as a result, a lot of the story kind of becomes predictable. Now, I will say the story does divert my expectations 2 or 3 times. I was expecting it to go left and it went right. And I really enjoyed that it did that. In terms of legacy sequels, this one does a lot of really interesting and really smart things that also help divert a lot of those expectations and make this story really kind of stand alone on its own a lot better than some of the other legacy sequels that we've also gotten. Long story short, this one doesn't feel like it was made as a cash grab. I will say this is one of the best openings I've seen to a film outside of the horror genre all year. This film comes out swinging and has just an absolutely bold opening, and it really kind of sets the tone for the remainder of the film. Much like the original film, I felt like my issue here also stemmed from the fact that this is a movie that honestly just felt like it had sequences that just ran on a bit too long. Now, most blockbusters typically last between 2 to 3 hours nowadays, so it's not unheard of for a film like this. What I'm ultimately saying is I felt like the film didn't always use its time wisely. In some ways it felt like it was trying to copy the original without actually remaking the original, and I kind of felt like some of the intentions of originality versus legacy kind of went to war throughout the course of this film, and sometimes make a little bit of a messy plot. Anthony Ramos is in this movie, and he's fantastic as well. I really enjoy his and Jones's dynamic. I really kind of enjoy the playful rivalry between him and Powell's character. So ultimately, he was another standout. At the end of the day, this is just a really fun film. This is a popcorn film. It has some surprising depth that I don't want to necessarily address here because it does dip into spoiler territory, but it really does have just a lot of fun, and much like its predecessor, it's just a good popcorn flick that will probably also earn its own cult classic status. Well, I'm ready to run Twisters. I did it that time. Through our Rorschach rating scale. I am going to make a special exception for this one. I'm going to give this one an EF4. If you've seen the film, you understand that rating. Ultimately, this film's a lot of fun. It has a lot of heart. It has a lot of humor, and it just has great chemistry between its characters. Glen Powell absolutely steals the show for me. Daisy Edgar-Jones is a standout performance in here, as is Anthony Ramos, but there are some times where pacing became an issue for me, or it felt like it was at war between telling an original story or completely trying to remake certain portions of the original film and kind of feels like the execution is kind of messy at times. If you guys have seen Twisters, what did you guys think? Comment below and let me know. But let's talk about mental health, shall we? If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're reviewing, talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. Honestly, I would be remiss not to talk about this film and also talk about survivor's guilt. I don't want to jump into how the film addresses this, but it does show intently a lot more damage from tornadoes in the aftermath than the first film did. And as a result, thematically, it follows kind of the unpacking of survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt, much like grief in general, is one of those things that is never a one-size-fits-all type of thing. I've talked about it on here before. I've talked about it on several of our podcasts, but grief is going to look differently for each and every person. Kind of seeing the Ramos character and how he responds to survivor guilt and processes that versus how Jones's character processes that is a great example of the differing ways to kind of go about it and also grieve and come to peace with it. This is just a reminder that you're not alone, and that if you or someone you know is going through the grieving process or currently going through the survivor's guilt phase of grief, to check out our resources in the show notes below. Below, you guys will find a resource library that includes everything from general mental health help to grief as well. With that being said, Twisters is now playing in theaters everywhere from Universal Pictures, Warner Brothers Pictures, and Amblin Entertainment. In the show notes below, you guys will also find links to our podcast network, how to support our mental health education efforts via Patreon, all of our social media, more movie reviews like this, and that subscribe button. So until next time, remember to keep it classy and keep on wrangling.